Hi, Dr. Allen here, and then we're going to talk about the dermis now. This is for the lab portion of the class. We talked a bit about the dermis in the lecture portion, but we're going to concentrate on a few different areas here with some different images. If you haven't seen the lecture portion of this of the dermis and those structures, I recommend you go to that as well because these are meant to be complementary. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we are, your objectives. Identify the layers of the skin, and then we're just going to recognize various cytologic and histologic features of the skin, specifically the dermis region. All right, so again, here's this view of that cube of skin with the epidermis here. We're going to talk about this zone here, the dermis. You can kind of see all the different structures that are in here that we'll be talking about. And then, of course, the hypodermis down below. But let's focus in on this blue zone. So here we are with the dermis. We have the papillary and reticular layer. We're going to also talk about Meissner corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles in relation to sensations. Various glands such as sebaceous glands and sudiferous glands. But we're going to save hair follicles for the next lesson, just for the sake of time. It's already a long video lesson to begin with, but we'll push the hair follicles to the next section. All right, here we have the papillary and the reticular layer as noted here. So just kind of an overview. Again, here is the epidermis right here. This below it is the dermis, and then we have the papillary layer, which is this top section where you have these papillae that poke into the epidermis here. This is a loose areolar connective tissue. And then down below that is the reticular layer. So papillary layer, reticular layer. Here down here is more of that dense, irregular connective tissue, which has many more structures compared to this papillary layer. So if we're going to look at it through this typical cube-like section of skin, the papillary layer is just kind of this zone right here, this top zone here where that blue is. Okay, very, very thin compared to the rest of the dermis, this particular layer. But the papillary layer just has these papillae, and it's that zone of interface between the epidermis and the dermis. So looking at this papillary dermis, we can see that there are some collagen fibers, some elastic fibers, and then these nuclei here, these are fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are responsible for generating this extracellular matrix here in the dermis. So that's the papillary layer. Here is the reticular layer down below that here. This kind of this thicker bottom zone. Some things in the reticular dermis important to know about. Look how much more dense and irregular these collagen fibers are here. You can kind of see how much thicker they are. You can see there's things called hair follicles. So the hair follicle is this thing right here. That's this structure right here. I see how big this is. And this is part of that hair follicle coming up as well. Because remember, this is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object. So perhaps that hair follicle kind of curved up and along like that, and then just kind of took that slice of the skin there. And then you have some glands here. These are the eccrine sweat glands that are over in this section here. And this is the sebaceous glands. Now, looking at the histology between these two, you can kind of tell a few things. We'll get into it a little bit deeper as we start comparing those two glands. But these sebaceous glands, these are filled with more of an oily substance compared to these eccrine sweat glands, which are more watery. Okay, and then so therefore these cells look more, for lack of a better word, poofy, and these are just filled with more of the lipids, and they have that very oily kind of appearance when you're looking at this compared to these other glands over here. So Let's take a look at this layer of the dermis. Question is, can you identify some of the components here in this dermal layer? So let's go over a few things. So hair follicle, you can kind of see this is kind of like a cross section of it. The hair kind of comes around like so, like this. Here's another hair follicle over here. This is a sebaceous gland. It's that oily gland here by the appearance of those cells. Over here is that sweat gland, the eccrine sweat gland. This is a tubular gland, right? So these are lots of these are cross sections. So you can imagine the tubes kind of coming all swirling around and back and forth like so. These are collagen fibers. The nuclei of probably a bunch of fibroblasts over here. This section over here, this looks like adipose tissue to me over in this little area here. And some more sweat glands. Yeah, I think those are the kind of the major components, at least that I can see in this portion of the dermis. These a little more adipose cells over here as well. All right, so that's the papillary and reticular layer. Let's go look at some of the sensory structures in the skin. Okay, so you're going to need to know a few things. There's a lot of them sound alike, Meissner corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. That sounds very, I don't know, maybe a little exotic and unfamiliar probably. But here's just kind of some images of it here. So this is one and this is the other. So when you're looking at visible body, these Meissner corpuscles, they kind of have this little structure here. They're a little bit smaller compared to these Pacinian corpuscles. You can kind of see this yellow fiber, that's the nerve, and there's kind of this little bundle of nerve tissue inside of that, right? Compare that to these Pacinian ones, which looks more like layered like an onion would. Here's another close-up version of that Meissner corpuscle here, right? Take a look here. Remember, this is that basement membrane. Remember what this cell is? That's the Merkel cell. This one over here is that Langerhans or dendritic cell up here. This one over here is probably a melanocyte. And then these are all keratinocytes. When you see these other things right here, these little red and blue things, those are blood vessels. You don't have to worry about that right now. And this green thing here is what's called a lymphatic vessel. But you don't have to worry about that, at least for this lab. You will in ANP2 though. So here's that other structure, that Pacinian corpuscle right here. So Meissner corpuscle is this little tiny one. Pacinian corpuscle is this bigger one, looks layered like maybe, you know, like an onion kind of a thing. And here's that nerve coming down there. As an aside, see this gland right here, this kind of this coily thing, that sweat gland. Remember I showed you on that histology one where it looked like, you know, if you did a cross section right here, you just kind of see like the little coily nature of that gland. When we get to future slides, keep that in mind and I'll point that out again for you. Here's another view of the Pacinian corpuscle here. This is trying to be a little three-dimensional from visible body. But where are these located? Various areas, mammary glands, genital organs, joints, tendons, and muscles as well, as in addition to the dermis. And what do? They sense vibration and pressure. Okay. The Pacinian corpuscles, vibration and pressure. When I look at this, the way that it just kind of looks like that, I can imagine just some vibrations going through this structure here. See how it's all kind of like, you know, wrapped up and coiled kind of a thing. When I see that, that makes me think vibrations. Pacinian corpuscles, important for you to know. So when we're talking about sensation in the dermis, there's four main structures I'd like for you to know. Okay, so first one are these Merkel cells. I have that labeled as A. That's this little guy right up here. The Meissner corpuscles are these guys right here. The Pacinian corpuscles, this guy right here, that's D. And then the free nerve ending, C, is this over here. You see this nerve just kind of comes up here and just kind of ends like that. Okay, those are the four broad categories of sensation. Now look at this A and B. Merkel and Meissner, they both start with the letter M. They both kind of sound alike and look alike. They're also called tactile cells, like a Merkel tactile cell and a Meissner tactile corpuscle. Remember, tactile is just kind of like touching things, right? So both Merkel cells and Meissner corpuscles have to do with the sense of touch. Okay, it's just they're in different areas of the skin. Now there's more nuances to that as well, but for now, just remember both of those. To start with the letter M, they have to do with touch. Merkel cells touch, Meissner corpuscles touch. The free nerve endings, they do things more like pain, temperature, some other stuff. And then these Pacinian corpuscles, remember that vibration sense and the pressure sense that it would feel. So here's just a little bit of a differentiator here. I put this together. So Merkel cells and Meissner cells, the M's, they're both tactile and they sense touch. These Meissner cells, they do a little bit more, but just think about touch. Okay. Free nerve endings, these are actually dendrites of neurons. Remember we talked about dendrites? They detect pain, temperature, itch, tickling, and some of these other things. And then of course Pacinian corpuscles are the vibration and pressure. So we talked about the cellular level of sensation in the skin. And let's take a step back and look at kind of the bigger picture of sensation in the skin. And that's using the concept of what's called dermatomes. Now, here is an image from visible body that depicts dermatomes. And dermatome is basically a region of the skin that is innervated by sensory fibers from a single spinal nerve. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, here in your uh, here in your brain area, right? You have the brain that goes down, and the spinal cord comes down here like so. Okay. As that spinal cord comes down, there are nerves that come out at each level of the vertebra that goes down along the spine. Okay. The spine, or I'm sorry, the spinal nerves are labeled based on where they are on the body. So there's the cervical spinal nerves. Remember, that's that cervical region, and they're labeled C2 through C8. That's because of that's just how you number the vertebrae. So the nerves that come out of the vertebrae, or I should say that space between the vertebrae, C2 through C8. And then you have the thoracic spinal nerves. Remember, this is that thoracic region we talked about in that first lab. T1 through T12 kind of comes down through here. You have the lumbar spinal nerves down here, L1 through L5, and then the sacral spinal nerves down here, S1 through S5. And so as each nerve comes out, there is a particular zone of the skin that's being innervated by that particular nerve. Why is that important? Well, you can test for deficiencies in maybe nerve sensations. So for example, if you have a compression of a spinal nerve up here in the neck, you might feel some numbness and tingling down a particular part of the arm, like maybe if it's the back of the arm, or if it reaches this particular fingertip over here, you can say that, aha, you probably have a compression of this particular nerve. It's hard for me to see, but this one looks like C8. Yeah, yeah, very very fine print. So if it's involving this this fifth finger over here, um, maybe there's a problem with the C8 nerve root. You kind of see how C8 is right in this zone right here. Maybe you can't see because it's so small. But if this kind of thing interests you, especially those kinesiology folks, this is probably something that's very, very important, a very, very important concept for you to know. Same thing with the nursing folks. As you're assessing your patients and they're having pain or various sensations in a certain region of the skin, you can take a look at that and try to see if maybe it's a particular spinal nerve that's causing that problem. Okay, enough of sensations for now. Now let's take a look at some glands that you might see in the dermis here, right? So we have sebaceous glands and sudoriferous glands. And you can kind of see here the sebaceous gland is highlighted in blue through the visible body and pointing to this arrow. So we're talking about this structure right here on this hair. So what are sebaceous glands? Well, first they're exocrine glands. Now if you recall, In a previous lab, we talked about epithelium. One type of epithelium is glandular epithelium. And so glandular epithelium can either be exocrine or endocrine. Remember that. The endocrine glands are things like the thyroid, the pituitary, and other glands like that. They release hormones that go out to distant parts of your body. Exocrine glands, on the other hand, are those glands here that act locally, and they secrete a substance, and substance is just kind of there. So it doesn't go into the bloodstream like a hormone, right? So that's what an exocrine gland is. Sebaceous glands, these are connected to hair follicles. You can see this nice picture of that, highlighted in blue thanks to visible body. These sebaceous glands are throughout the body, but they're very abundant in your scalp and in your face. And they secrete a substance called sebum, right? Sebaceous glands secrete sebum. And what is sebum? Well, it's a mixture of triglycerides, cholesterol, proteins, and salts. Now, if you recall, triglycerides and cholesterol, those are lipids. Lipids are hydrophobic. They're oily, don't mix well with water. Um, and normally what the sebum does is it'll coat hairs, right? That substance will coat the hairs. It'll also lubricate the skin, and it'll inhibit or hinder bacterial growth. So if you don't wash your hair for a few days, or some people are unfortunate, especially in adolescence, to have problems with acne. You can have overproduction of sebum. These sebaceous glands can get clogged, back up, and get infected. That's that acne that people might get. But it could also just have oily skin as well. And that's a normal thing that happens, but perhaps in adolescence, thanks to various hormones that are raging through the body, cause an overproduction of this sebum. This is a slide from a previous lab. Remember, we talked about sebaceous glands. We talked about two types of these exocrine glands. There are merocrine glands and there's holocrine glands. Right? I blocked this out because that's not important for sebaceous glands. So sebaceous glands are holocrine glands. You see this right here, right? So these secretory cell fragments, they're kind of released right along with dead cell fragments, that sebum and everything, and it comes out. And just kind of imagine that when you're thinking about the oily skin, especially like on the face and the scalp. Here's another image from visible body. Okay, so here's just kind of a diagrammatic representation of sebaceous glands. Here's that hair, and here's the gland here that looks like this. Has that holocrine secretion method, right? So chunks of the cells kind of get secreted out along with it. And disorders of these sebaceous glands, we talked about acne, where those they get plugged up, and then you can get like a pimple, or worse sometimes. There's other conditions called seborrheic dermatitis, that dysfunction of this sebaceous gland. A condition called rosacea. And then xerosis is a condition of dry skin, right? So if your sebaceous glands aren't working properly, it's not going to secrete that oily substance, which can result in dry skin. The fancy term for that is xerosis. You don't have to know these bottom ones for the test or anything. They're just kind of a gee whiz sort of thing. But we're going to talk more about acne, not only in the lab, but in future lectures as well. Okay, so that's the one. If you want to think about one of them, think about that one. But these ones you don't have to know for this class. Okay, so that is the sebaceous glands. That's this guy over here. The other gland we talk about is sudoriferous glands. And these are these coiled glands down here. And you can see how this gland will come up and then it'll exit to the surface of the skin. So sudoriferous glands, remember this diagram here from the previous lab? I blocked out this one for the sebaceous gland, right? So these holocrine glands, right? Maybe I can even kind of go like this here and just go like that. Okay, so we're talking about these merocrine glands. And the example I gave a couple weeks ago was that sweat glands are a type of merocrine gland because what they do is they have these secretory vesicles right here. They secrete that substance into this gland and it goes out the duct. Okay, but the cells themselves remain intact compared to these sebaceous glands. All right, so now sudoriferous glands, there's two types. Okay, they're both coiled tubular glands. They're very simple, relatively simple as far as a gland goes. But these are very important that I want you to know. Okay, first is something called eccrine. The other one is called apocrine. Now, eccrine sweat glands, they're located throughout the body, and what they do is they open to the surface of the skin through those little sweat pores, and I pointed that out in that previous image. The primary purpose of this is thermal regulation. Thermal regulation. What do I mean by that? What it means is that it helps to regulate the body temperature. Okay, so when we talk about one of the functions of the integumentary system, one of them is thermal regulation, which can be done in a number of ways. As far as the eccrine sweat glands go, they will secrete perspiration or sweat. What's in sweat? Well, um, it's mostly water. There's a little bit of salt in there, maybe a little bit of urea, maybe some other toxins. But this perspiration or sweat, its job is to help you with keeping your body cool. So if you're excessively hot, your body will perspire. The evaporation of that perspiration, especially in the presence of a strong wind or maybe with like a fan inside of a house, right? That evaporation of that sweat from your skin helps to cool off your body. That's why, like when you're exercising a lot and you perspire a lot, that's just a way for your body to help cool itself. The apocrine glands, on the other hand, these sweat glands are located primarily in the axilla or the underarms and in the groin, maybe some other areas. But these glands will open into hair follicles and not the skin. And these apocrine sweat glands, they produce a very, very characteristic odor once their secretions interact with bacteria that's on the skin. And that results in the classic body odor, or BO, right? It's that very characteristic odor, usually due to emotional sweating, right? So anxiety, stress, that sort of stuff. It could also be activated during sexual activity as well. Here's an image from visible body. You see here on this top arrow that it's pointing to a gland, this coiled gland that empties out into the surface of the skin. You can see some of these other pores out here as well on the surface of the skin. That's the thermoregulation of the eccrine sweat glands. So perspiration will come out, wind will come by, and the water will evaporate off, and it cools you down. The apocrine sweat glands, these have these coils as well. They release into these hair follicles here. The apocrine sweat glands, they're the ones that maybe result from high emotions, anxiety, stress, feeling nervous or anxious, also for sexual activity. And this is the ones that when it interacts with bacteria will give you that very characteristic odor, especially under your arms or in your groin area. All right, last slide here. We're going to talk about the hair follicles in the next lesson. So we'll see you at that time.